Welcome to the GeoInsight, where we unpack major global current affairs, one story at a time. Today, a critical turning point in the Israel-Gaza conflict. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered immediate, powerful strikes in Gaza, putting a fragile ceasefire at risk and raising big questions about the next chapter in this conflict. Let's dive in. Here's what we know so far. On 28 October 2025, Netanyahu's office announced that Israel would carry out powerful attacks in the Gaza Strip immediately. According to Israeli officials, the military took this step after accusing Hamas of attacking Israeli forces in southern Gaza, in the city of Rafah, an area under Israeli control as part of the ceasefire agreement, and handing over remains of an Israeli hostage, which Israel says had already been partially recovered, accusing Hamas of violating the deal. Local Gaza health authorities reported that Israeli airstrikes killed at least 26 people in one wave of attacks, including civilians. And from the Israeli side, one soldier was reported killed. So what we have is a ceasefire in place since 10 October, brokered via international mediators, being tested, a sudden flare-up triggered by contested events, and now the risk of escalation. This escalation matters because of several interlocking stakes. 1. The ceasefire's credibility. The internationally brokered deal was meant to bring a lull in hostilities. Israel now argues the deal is already breached by Hamas, while Hamas counters saying Israel itself violated terms. If the ceasefire collapses, we could see a full-scale renewal of the war. 2. Hostage and remains issue. One of the focal points is the return of bodies and hostages. Israel asserts that Hamas returned remains of an Israeli hostage whose body was already partially retrieved, calling that a violation. This hits a raw nerve in Israeli public opinion and pushes the government towards response rather than restraint. 3. Regional ripple effects. Beyond the Israel-Gaza boundary, any escalation carries implications for the broader region. Potential involvement of supportive countries, pressure on diplomacy, humanitarian fallout in Gaza, and the risk of wider conflict. The reported strikes already killed civilians in Gaza, raising voices of condemnation. 4. Domestic politics. For Netanyahu, internal dynamics matter. A right-wing coalition pressing for tougher action, public anger over hostages, and Israeli security concerns all feed into the decision to order strikes now. The timing is thus partly strategic. Let's parse the triggers more closely. The attack in Rafah. Israeli military says Hamas militants fired on Israeli troops in an area under Israel's control, thus violating the ceasefire. Hamas denies involvement. The remains dispute. Israel claimed that Hamas handed over the body of an Israeli hostage, Ofer Tsarfati, whose remains had been recovered previously, making the handover a false gesture that undermined trust. The urgency for Israel. Netanyahu summoned a high-level security meeting and then ordered the strikes. His office said, following security consultations, the Prime Minister instructed the military echelon to carry out powerful strikes in the Gaza Strip immediately. Putting it together, Israel views these acts as material breaches of the ceasefire and thus felt compelled to respond quickly to restore deterrence, reassure the Israeli public, and signal to Hamas and external actors that violations won't go unanswered. Now let's look ahead. What paths could this conflict take from here? Scenario A. Limited retaliation but ceasefire holds. Israel carries out a measured strike. Hamas retaliates somewhat, then both sides de-escalate back into the ceasefire framework. International mediators push both sides back into talks. This is the least bad outcome. Scenario B. Escalation into broader war. If violence escalates, more Israeli strikes, Hamas fires rockets. Other actors join in the war could reignite fully. The ceasefire could then collapse entirely, with major humanitarian consequences for Gaza. Scenario C. Stalemate with low-intensity conflict. An alternative is repeated skirmishes rather than full-blown war, targeted strikes, hostage issues, diplomatic pressure, but no major breakthrough either way. Both sides endure war fatigue, but don't resolve underlying issues. Considering the variables the hostage remains, the domestic pressure in Israel, Hamas's behavior, and international involvement, the likelihood of scenario B or C is significant. Good question. Why should audiences outside the region care? Because the Israel-Gaza conflict is a pivotal hotspot in world geopolitics, influencing US, Middle East, and global diplomacy. A breakdown could affect energy markets, refugee flows, regional stability, alliances, and even global security concerns. It's also a litmus test of international influence. Since the ceasefire had global mediation, any failure reflects on diplomatic leverage. Humanitarian impact. The Gaza Strip is one of the most densely populated conflict zones worldwide. Renewed violence means large civilian suffering, pressing global conscience and international law issues. Strategic precedent, how Israel responds, and how Hamas and other militant actors tolerate or exploit ceasefires sets precedents for other conflicts globally. To wrap up this main section, here are the key takeaways and what you should keep an eye on. Key takeaways. Netanyahu's decision signals Israel feels the ceasefire is under threat and is shifting back into a harder line. The remains hostage issue is a key flashpoint, one that has emotive weight in Israel and can trigger strong military responses. Ceasefires in this conflict remain extremely fragile and dependent on trust, precise implementation, and outside mediation. Even a small incident like an attack at Rafah can quickly balloon into major escalation. The international dimension remains critical to either stability or instability. What to watch next? Will Hamas respond with rocket fire or militant operations following the strikes? Will Israel limit its retaliation or expand into broader Gaza operations? What will the U.S. and global mediators do to stay involved? Escalate support or step back? How will civilian casualties and humanitarian issues shape international reaction? Will hostages remains negotiations continue or collapse completely? While this is a current event, it's rooted in a history of conflict, ceasefires, intermittent war, and fragile diplomacy. A quick context check. Since the large war triggered in October 2023, the Gaza Strip has experienced repeated escalations and pause periods. Trust has been eroded on both sides. Ceasefires operated as temporary breathing spaces. For example, the ceasefire that began around 10 October 2025 was meant to bring respite. Underlying challenges remain: unresolved hostages, troop presence, governance of Gaza, tunnel and militant networks, humanitarian collapse. In this sense, today's development is less an anomaly and more a reflection of the structural instability of the truce arrangements. All right, to our viewers, thanks for sticking with me through this deep dive. The dynamics in Gaza matter. They ripple far beyond the immediate region, and they're shaping the future of the Middle East. If you found value in this breakdown, here's your call to action. Please hit the like button. It helps the channel get seen by more people. Subscribe to the GeoInsight and click the bell so you don't miss future updates on global geopolitics. Comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think this ceasefire will survive this episode? Which scenario do you believe is most likely? What should international actors do? Stay tuned for further updates. We'll revisit this story as it develops. Until next time, thanks for watching the GeoInsight, where we turn news into insight.